Good evening. Word on the Curb podcast. I'd like to welcome you this evening. And thank you for coming back. Thank you for joining me. We're a little behind schedule because of technical difficulties, of course, not to mention allergies. But hang in here with us. Tonight, our topic is part two about is love blind? So let's talk about it a little bit. I am Annette, your host here at Word on the Curb. You can see us live on Facebook at Word on the Curb. You can see us on Facebook at the Black Girls Locker Room. And you can see us on YouTube. You can also hear us on Sirius Radio. That's right. We're on Sirius now. We're serious about this business. Hydrate, eat fruit, moisturize your feet, hands, and face, and mind your business. Tonight, I am wearing a local artist, Rachel Barlow's t-shirt. She is an author and a poet. She has several books. I love, love, love her t-shirt. I love her t-shirt. And once you look her up, Rachel Barlow, you can find her on Facebook. She's a poet and an author. And if you ever need anybody to bring you that poetry, she's got it for you. Yep, she's for hire. Check her out. Rachel Barlow, Facebook, Trenton, New Jersey, an author and a poet. Salute. It's Women's History Month. So, as you know, last week, the week before last, we talked about our topic was Is Love Blind? So I'm a little hoarse, bear with me, due to allergies. I've been working on them all day. Is love blind? Is love blind? Is it blind? Yeah, and I think we determined that sometimes it is. So we talked about Nesa, and I had Nessa's age wrong on the last podcast. Nesa is actually 56 years old. She's a Black woman who stumbled into a relationship and had her tripping. And by the tripping part, we mean, the question is love blind? Was she blind in the relationship? She gives me notes. I've shared that with you before. And I want to also mention that what doesn't apply, let it fly, because the topic tonight is not just based on Nessa's story, but some of my own experience, strength, and hope about love and blindness and how we can be distracted and how it happens so easily. There's some perfect people out there that it's never happened to. I'm not one of them. And so Nessa says that she couldn't figure out why she was so attracted to a man who obviously didn't love or respect her. And the idea or the knowledge or the awareness that he didn't love and respect her wasn't always there, as she has previously stated in our last podcast. It wasn't always there. She didn't know. She didn't know that he didn't love and respect her. That was a gradual awareness, as is the case with many of us many times. It was gradual. The awareness was gradual. It didn't happen all at once. Nessa is successful in her own right and well prepared to take care of herself financially. Having been out of a relationship, I'm not going to go into that because Nessa wants to remain anonymous, and too much information might attract some folks who might be partially aware, and she doesn't want that. And so I've agreed to keep her anonymity. But she says she was successful and prepared to take care of herself financially. It was the companionship and the friendship that she missed after having been out of a relationship for a while. And so Nessa was distracted and not only was she distracted, but she had some other issues going on that we'll get into, in the last podcast, because it's a part one, which was 2 weeks ago. Then we have part two, which is tonight, and we have part three. So she said that what she missed most about not being in a relationship, it wasn't, her head in the bed. That's not what she missed. She missed the friendship. She missed the companionship. Um, and she wanted a heart to call home. That's what she was looking for. Those are her words exactly. She wanted a heart to call home. And sometimes, you know, um, we're looking for love in all the wrong places and we don't even realize we're in the wrong place. So she admits stumbling into this relationship, or as she now refers to it, as a sex ship, because there was no love and there was no friendship. She said the sex was great, but the love was lacking. And that she really thought in the beginning that there was a friendship in him and with her. Nessa thought that there was a friendship there. She does not deny at all that she turned a blind eye after the fact. She admits it. She wasn't admitting it then. But she turned a blind eye to many of the shenanigans that this man did, and that he didn't do much to hide them. And so she speaks to that. So our topic is love blind? And she said they were in a restaurant once. A woman approached the table, demanded to speak to him. He went outside to speak to her, came back and said it was a former co-worker who was irate. And she let it go. The phone calls, interrupting them late at night, she let it go. And so after that relationship, it was so traumatizing for her because she accepted so much, with the lack of respect and the lack of love, the lack of friendship, the lack of companionship. She accepted that because, you know, he was attentive to her, even though all of those other things were lacking. He was attentive and he paid attention. He talked to her. He recognized her weaknesses and her needs with respect to drawing her closer to him. So she has since had therapy. And one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is trauma pleasure. Now, I had to not only reach out to my therapist, my former therapist, my grief therapist, but I also had to reach out to my coach because I didn't really understand trauma pleasure. But the definition of it is seeking or finding pleasure and stimulation in the presence of extreme danger, violence, risk, or shame. Don't miss the shame part. Because that's a part of her story in part three, and that is frequently connected to trauma, something that she hadn't thought much about, something that many of us don't think much about, right? Because that's not what we're looking for. But one of the things that I want you to take away from this tonight is that love is blind. It can be blind, and it's blind for many reasons. In Nessa's situation, it was trauma pleasure. And so one of the things that my coach, who is licensed, shared with me is that trauma is defined not by what happened in the past, but by how those past events and trauma impact us now. That's how it's defined. I mean, a lot of us know what trauma can be. It can be a number of things. It can be abuse. It can be rape. It can be incest. It can be sibling rivalry. It can be a number of things that create trauma. But it's the experience that we have now as a result of that trauma that defines that trauma for us. And so I had to come to terms with that in dealing with Nessa and come to some understanding about it. She said the sex was great, but the sex wasn't everything. It was great, but it wasn't everything. And she said that she really enjoyed um, being with this person until the end. It just became traumatizing in and of itself because there was no friendship there. And so, trauma symptoms are not caused by the triggering event, right? That's that trauma pleasure. It's not caused by the trauma pleasure. It's caused by the actual trauma. And it is not, and I repeat, it is not, it's not how we define it. We define it by how it impacts us. So, again, my name is Annette. Her name is Nessa. She's 56 years old. She was involved in a relationship that in the beginning she appreciated and she wanted to be in, but eventually it became traumatic in and of itself, in that there was some additional trauma and abuse, lack of respect, lack of love, and lack of companionship, although he was attentive to her needs. Not all of them, but most of them. Sexually, of course. He took her on a fantastic voyage. Those were her words. I've had some voyages myself with my husband, my late husband, but yes, a fantastic voyage. And that's how she got caught up. So I just want to remind you guys that uh, trauma bonding, trauma pleasure, and the difficulties associated with that, and the misunderstanding about why and how we stay in bad relationships is not always something that we understand. And so I just want to remind you that it can happen to the best of us. The perfect ones never experience it, but those of us who do are pretty much aware of trauma and how it impacts us. And so I just want you to understand that this is a real person who has suffered real trauma and who is interested in rebuilding her life and has gone to therapy to do that. We'll be back again, not next week, but the week after with part 3. And hopefully Nessa, who does not want to be identified on screen, will be in the background to share some of her experience, strength, and hope with that. And what I'd like to say, based on my experience, strength, and hope, is that none of us ever planned to be in bad situations. Sometimes they simply happen. And I want to remind you that no matter what has happened, to forgive yourself, because, life goes on, the beat goes on, and we get to where we need to be in those situations. And so please remember that trauma pleasure is real, trauma bonding is real, and love can absolutely be blind, especially when they make you feel good. I'll see you again soon. Again, I'm Annette. I want to shout out my producers, Christina and Frank Sasso. Thank you so much for working with me, staying committed with me, and helping me grow in my podcasting. Have a good night. And again, thank you for joining me here at Word on the Curb podcast. Good night. We are out. We have something going on here, but I want you to know, stop the camera, and we're also going to mute. It is technical difficulty.